time for love and laughter. The days will pass like summer storms. The winter winds will follow after. But there is love, and love is warm.
This is the story of young love that survived through the ages. It survives still, even though the two for whom such strong love was ignited remain only in memory and spirit. That young man and woman, as time unfolded, became examples of love, devotion, and resolve passed down to and through their offspring. Still today, their influence is alive and well. The year was 1919. Woodrow Wilson was President of the United States. The country's population was 104,514,000. Race riots erupted in 26 U.S. cities in July. Dial telephones were introduced. Sir Barton won the Kentucky Derby. Cincinnati defeated the Chicago White Sox to claim the World Series. In September of that year, about 3/4 of the Boston police force went on strike. And in the rural reaches of Orange County, Indiana's Southeast Township, Elvis Stroud and Rosa, more commonly called Rosie, Bullington, were falling in love. That September, they married, pledging their love and commitment to each other. My name is Mariah Moon Blaylock, a great-granddaughter of Elvis and Rosie Stroud, a granddaughter of Geneva Stroud Moon, and daughter of Roger Moon. I and other descendants who are generations down from Elvis and Rosie and never met them benefit today from the values they instilled in their children and grandchildren. As September 27, 2019 marks the 100th anniversary of Elvis and Rosie's marriage, a few of their descendants joined together to share with you what we are calling Elvis and Rosie, A Century of Love.
I am Rosie Stroud Morehouse, a great-great-granddaughter of Elvis and Rosie Stroud, great-granddaughter of Nolan Stroud, granddaughter of Junior Stroud, and daughter of Jerry Stroud. I am Rosie Stroud's namesake. For me, sharing a name with Rosie Stroud was something very special, like having a little key to the past that could open up a secret door into a memory. While I never had the privilege of meeting her or getting to know her personally, sharing the name of Mama Rosie was something I knew I could be proud of. I remember the smile it would bring to Papa Nolan's face, a smile that reassured me of the honor I carried. That experience inspired me as I chose names for my 3 children, ensuring that each one had a tie to their ancestry, to special people in mine and my husband's families. I wanted them to have that same feeling of pride as they hear stories of their namesakes and know how important their family roots are that they grow from.
I'm Kendra Moon Mathis, a great-granddaughter of Elvis and Rosie Stroud, a granddaughter of Geneva Stroud Moon, and daughter of Roger Moon. Elvis and Rosie, when they began their lives together, and even as they continued together for 50-plus years, could never have envisioned the technological age in which the 3rd, 4th, and 5th generations of their lineage would live. Elvis and Rosie never envisioned such phenomena as email, texting, and social media. Yet, in a time when their descendants have become geographically scattered, and when getting to know one another on front porches and living rooms has faded, it is these technological advances that have allowed younger generations to connect and share their Stroud and Bullington heritage. This sharing of Elvis and Rosie, A Century of Love, is made possible because of Sean Martin Elliott. She is descended through Bonnie Stroud Martin and Mark Martin, and a few years ago created and continues to administer the Family of Elvis and Rosa Stroud Facebook group. Her vision not only has strengthened the tie that binds our family, but also has resulted in a priceless collection of photographs and stories that have been instrumental in the production of this tribute to the couple from whom we have descended.
I am Kyle Brown, a great-great-grandson of Elvis and Rosie, a great-grandson of Mary Lou Stroud Colber, grandson of Violet Colber Burton, and son of Debbie Burton Brown. I never met Elvis or Rosie Stroud, yet I am very familiar with the names. Their descendants are numerous, and stories about them are many. The memories held by their grandchildren and the older of their great-grandchildren are countless and priceless. They are recollections from the many years Elvis and Rosie spent on their farm in southern Orange County, where their grandchildren walked to the Hanging Rock and played near the pond, in the outbuildings, or, to Rosie's dismay, on the slanted cellar door. Other memories are of the days when Elvis and Rosie lived on a peaceful street in Marengo, Indiana, where the sidewalk was swept in the mornings, where Elvis sat on the porch and watched freight trains make their way through town, and where younger grandchildren enjoyed the opportunities to make the short walk downtown for candy and other snacks. Again, the memories are countless, but a few of them are shared now in Rosie and Elvis, A Century of Love.
It wasn't as though Cohen Elvis Stroud and Rosa Pearl Bullington ever actually met. Instead, it was more the case that to each of them the other was just always there. Elvis, as he came to be called, and Rosa grew up within 1.5 miles of each other in Southeast Township in Orange County, Indiana. Elvis was born on June 9, 1897, to Virgil Stroud and Janie Aiken Stroud. Less than 3 years later, on January 29, 1900, Rosa was born to Elijah and Mary Ellen Wells Bullington. 18 years later, also on January 29th, Elvis Stroud walked Rosa Bullington home from a birthday party at his house, where she and Elvis's brother Otha had been honored on their 18th birthdays. He asked if he could see her on the following evening. She agreed, and 2019 finds us a century and scores of descendants later. Courtship has changed a lot over the years. When Elvis and Rosa went out, it was with the provision that they be accompanied by one of her younger brothers. Work and play were often combined to create a social gathering. Folks amused themselves with community cane stripping, bean hullins, and taffy pullins. After that first date, Rosa and Elvis decided to tie the knot. Otha Stroud and Grace Weathers were ready to take that same step, so on September 27, 1919, they boarded a Model T owned by Grace's father Henry and were married at the Orange County Courthouse. The first few months were spent in Elvis's parents' home. He helped his father on the farm. Then, in 1920, Elvis and Rosa moved into their own new home, a 2-room, 16-foot by 32-foot house with an exterior of weatherboard that had been painted white, a roof of pine shingles, and kitchen carpet made out of gunny sacks that had been dyed with walnut hulls. A big change was in store for young Elvis and Rosa in 1920. They were to assume the roles of parents as Geneva, the first of their offspring, was born on December 30th. 16 months later, on May 5th, 1922, Paul was born. It didn't take them long to learn that 2 children quite naturally were inclined to mischief. Geneva and Paul were inclined to sneak away to visit their grandparents' house. Geneva broke the family's only lamp one evening, which left Rosa thinking some disciplinary measures were in order. Elvis didn't quite see the need, and averted it by promising Rosa he would replace the lamp the next day. Little boys tend to want to be like their fathers, which probably explained Paul's enthusiasm when, at 4 years old, he got a pair of bib overalls like those Elvis wore. The proud little boy responded to his new gift with, "By Jacks, look at the pockets in 'em." The joys of parenthood only increased when Nolan was born on November 2nd, 1923, and Dorothy was born 2 years later on November 13th, 1925. With them came an entirely new set of situations, best illustrated by relating an incident that occurred once while Rosa was bathing Dorothy as a baby. Nolan was standing nearby during the process and was evidently being a bit bothersome. Rosa teasingly suggested to Dorothy, "Slap him, honey." Nolan misunderstood and, thinking the instructions were intended for him, instead slapped Dorothy.
At around that time, Elvis had the opportunity to go to Iowa to work for a farmer he had worked for before he and Rosa were married. Convincing Rosa to go wasn't difficult because she wanted to see her grandmother Wells in Iowa. So they took their 4 children and their suitcases, one of which Dorothy slept in, and boarded a train to Radcliffe in Hardin County, Iowa. Elvis worked on a number of farms and the family moved several times. 2 years after the move to Iowa, Mary Lou was born on May 2nd, 1928. Bonnie was born on July 8th, 1930. At around that time, Dorothy got a case of appendicitis and was sent to a hospital nearly 100 miles away in Iowa City. At 6, she wasn't able to understand why Geneva took her departure so seriously, and when Geneva cried, Dorothy curiously asked her, "What are you crying for? I'm the one who has to go." Rosa, too, had to spend some time in the hospital, leaving young Geneva in charge of the cooking. Apparently she wasn't that good at it, as suggested by Paul's refusal to eat the biscuits she once prepared. Geneva evidently was not too shaken by it and promptly informed him, "You might as well eat 'em for dinner, because if you don't eat 'em for dinner, you're gonna eat 'em for supper." Nolan wasn't so reluctant to eat. In fact, when he snitched the cake frosting, he didn't feel particularly bad that Bonnie got the blame and the punishment. Anna May was born on October 21, 1932. She might not have found the world very inviting. Those were the Depression years, and the Stroud family couldn't escape the effects. Elvis sold corn for 7 cents a bushel and oats for 10 cents a bushel, when each should have sold for 75 to 80 cents. He sold hogs for 2.5 cents per pound when the price should have been 12 to 15 cents per pound. He farmed 140 acres in Iowa, but couldn't afford to stay there and moved back to Indiana in 1935. Elvis said that during those years his family lived on beans, taters, and cabbage. The Stroud family didn't get many new things then, and when they did get something new, it was appreciated. Anna May donned her new dress with pride, and when she put it on, exclaimed, "I believe I look just about the best I've ever looked." The family had a hard time taking care of the things they did have. Mary Lou recalls accidentally breaking so many of the family's dishes that Rosa threatened to return the courtesy once Mary Lou had a home and dishes of her own. After returning to Indiana, the Strouds moved a few times before settling in 1938 at the Molly Rawlings place in Southeast Township in Orange County. It was there that the Strouds would stay for the bulk of their remaining time together. It was the place that would come to be known as home for the 30 years they lived there. Even after they would move again, it was still home. It wasn't long after that move that the Strouds heard wedding bells when Geneva married John Moon in 1940. She gave them Donald, Esther, Marvin, and Kurt, the first of 40 grandchildren that would be born to fill their lives during their later years. But the 1940s weren't filled with the happiest of times. Elvis and Rosa had another child, Edith Marie, in 1943, but she lived only 1 month. The 1940s were years of war, and the 2 Stroud sons were taken hundreds of miles from home and from one another to serve their country. The years to come would bring Elvis and Rosa many more grandchildren. To Geneva were born 6 more children, Raymond, Gerald, Margie, Roger, Denny, and Kevin. Paul married Delcy Van Lanningham. They had 7 children, Cecil, who died in infancy, Charles, Roy, Dale, Jim, Mary Elizabeth, who died in infancy, and Becky. Nolan married Anna May Ramsey, and to them were born Junior, Larry, who died in infancy, Joanne, and Jeannie. Mary Lou married Curtis Colber. They had 4 children, Violet, Helen, Gary, and Marita. Bonnie married Maxie Martin, and to them were born Carolyn, Barbara, Mark, Mary Ellen, Nancy, Kathy, Denny, Donnie, and Sherry. Anna May married Clarence By. They had 6 children, Maxine, Wanda, Marianne, Larry, Brenda, and Tony.
During the years those children were being born, Elvis continued earning a living by farming or working in construction. He worked briefly at a factory in Marengo, but the factory burned. Rosa, as usual, was the busy homemaker and spent her time cleaning, cooking, washing, sewing, and canning food for her family. In 1963, before the grandchildren had stopped coming, the older ones were beginning to get married and start families of their own. Elvis and Rosa became great-grandparents when Esther Moon Hess gave birth to Brian. 5 years later, Elvis and Rosa decided it was time they left the farm, and they moved to a house on Bradley Street in Marengo in nearby Crawford County. 1 year later, Elvis and Rosa found that they had shared 50 years together, and an open house celebration allowed well-wishers to congratulate them on their golden wedding anniversary. But a wedding anniversary 4 years later would be their last together. Rosa's death on October 4th, 1973, ended 54 years of sharing good times, struggling together through the bad, and loving one another enough that the bad times didn't matter anyway. For the next few years after Rosie's death, Elvis remained with Dorothy in his home on a quiet little street in Marengo. Elvis continued to garden for many years, with his children and grandchildren assisting him and Dorothy with the associated tasks. Elvis and Dorothy even became part of the CB radio craze that characterized southern Indiana, particularly during the record-breaking winters of 1977 and 1978. Long before the Facebook world that now keeps us connected, Elvis, with Kingfish as his handle, was able to visit via CB radio with some of his children who went by such handles as Granny Grunt and Mission Man. Dorothy went by Dottie Dot. Most of their grandchildren are fortunate enough to remember the things that are gone. Some have memories of the old farm where Elvis and Rosa lived so many years. When the old farmhouse burned, it took with it a part of the Stroud heritage. Some remember the holidays spent there, while others remember the birthday dinners, sugar cookies, the smell of honeysuckle in the yard, the well-worn paths between the farmhouse and Bonnie's house, and between Bonnie's and Paul's houses. Others might remember mushroom hunting on the Tater Ridge, or playing in or around the pond when they knew they weren't supposed to be playing there.
There is a time for love and laughter. The days will pass like summer storms. The winter winds will follow after. But there is love, and love is warm. There is a time for us to wander, when time is young and so are we. The woods are greener over yonder. The path is new, the world is free. There is a time when leaves are falling, the woods are gray, the paths are old. The snow will come when geese are calling. You need a fire against the cold. There is a time for us to wander, when time is young and so are we. The woods are greener over yonder. The path is new, the world is free. In the springtime, you find your love in the summer sun. The frost will come and bring the harvest, and you can sleep when day is done. There is a time for us to wander, when time is young and so are we. The woods are greener over yonder. The path is new, the world is free. The path is new, the world is free.
Jeannie Stroud Hine wrote, Daddy was sick, so Mamaw had Bonnie and Maxie bring her up home to check on him. The water was up and our footbridge broke when Mamaw walked across it, and she fell in the creek. I still have to laugh when I think of it because Mamaw was always so neat with her clothes and hair, and I can even remember her laughing also. Becky Stroud Tapp wrote, When I was in nursing school, I would stop on Bradley Street many days. On warm days, when I only had a class or two, I would stop and say, Papaw, would you like to ride with me today? His response was always, Dorothy, get my hat. Carol Martin Ash wrote, I remember working in the garden with Mamaw and Papaw, and Mamaw teaching me how to can the produce. Canned pickled beets were my favorite, and I still make them. If there weren't enough vegetables for canning, we would throw them all together, can them, and have vegetable soup on a cold winter evening. Aunt Anna May came every summer during blackberry season, and we picked berries, canned them, and made enough jelly for all of us for the winter. Nancy Martin Lambert wrote, "My favorite memory was staying all weekend and walking to the store with only a quarter and thinking I had it made." In adding to Nancy's memory, Becky Stroud Tapp wrote, "We should search everywhere for change to go to Fancher's." Roger Moon wrote, "I wish Kurt Moon could be here to write his memories for us. He shared countless meals with Grandpa and Aunt Dorothy. Kurt worked for many years at Fancher's store in downtown Marengo, and for much of that time, he came up the street to have his lunch with them. Mother and I often would meet him there for the meal." Kathy Martin Goldman wrote, "One of my favorite memories is spending the night or all weekend with Papa and Mama and getting to help with making a big breakfast. And I remember Mama in her apron. Nancy and I spent many, many nights with them." Roger Moon wrote, "The winter of 1977-1978 ranks as one of the worst winters on record in Indiana. The roads often were snow-covered, so I stayed with Grandpa and Aunt Dorothy most of the winter because the state road was cleared before the county roads, and I could make it to my classes at IU Southeast in New Albany. I spent many nights sitting by the fire and listening to Grandpa's stories. I would wake in the morning to the smell of eggs and bacon frying, and to the phone ringing or the CB radio sounding, and the aunts and uncles reporting just how much the thermometer had dipped at their respective places overnight." Tammy Stroud Haley wrote, "I could sit and watch their fish tanks for hours. It was so relaxing. I bought fish tank videos to play for my dementia residents at work because I knew from my childhood experiences that it would help calm them also." Roy Stroud wrote, "Grandma and Papa had names for different areas on the farm, such as Tater Ridge, Walnut Grove, and the New Ground. Papa would always let the little kids sit on his lap and comb his hair. As kids, we would play in the old chicken house, and Grandma would call, 'Cookies are ready,' and we would all go running to the house. She made the best sugar cookies."
Precious memories unseen angels sent from somewhere to my soul. How they linger ever near me, and the sacred past unfold. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever flood my soul. In the stillness of the midnight, precious sacred scenes unfold. In the stillness of the midnight, echoes from the past I hear. Old time singing, gladness bringing from that lovely land somewhere. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever flood my soul. In the stillness of the midnight, precious sacred scenes unfold.
precious sacred scenes unfold.
Precious memories.
Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Sometimes it feels like this world's gone crazy. Grandpa, take me back to yesterday, when the line between right and wrong didn't seem so hazy. Did lovers really fall in love to stay, stand beside each other, come what may? Is a promise really something people kept, not just something they would say? Families really bow their heads to pray, daddies really never go away. Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Grandpa, everything is changing fast. We call it progress, but I just don't know. And Grandpa, let's wander back into the past, then paint me the picture of long ago. Did lovers really fall in love to stay, stand beside each other, come what may? Is a promise really something people kept, not just something they would say and then forget? Families really bow their heads to pray, daddies really never go away. Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Oh, oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Families really bow their heads to pray, daddies really never go away.
Denny Moon wrote, I remember as a teenager going to Marengo for a haircut at Harold Peters' barbershop and visiting Granddad Stroud afterwards. Without fail, he would say, was the barbershop closed? And I would say, no, I got my haircut. His reply was, Surely he did not charge you for that, did he? And I'm sure if he could see my haircuts today, he would approve. About Grandma Stroud. When we went to visit and Roger and I would always ask Mom for money to go downtown to get a bottle of pop and a candy bar, Grandma would say every time, "You boys are going to dollar your mommy to death." And also about her, she never said goodbye when she hung up from a phone conversation. They were wonderful folks and are thought about often all these years later. Debbie Burton Brown wrote, I remember going over in the morning and Grandma would be making breakfast. She would be rolling out the dough for biscuits. Grandpa would say, "Come on in here and have some breakfast with your grandpa." If I was outside, he always said, "Come up here and swing with your old grandpa." I feel very blessed to have been able to live beside them and spend time with them. Jeannie Stroud Hine wrote, The family was planning a surprise birthday party for Papaw at Marengo Cave. Our job was to pick up Papaw and Dorothy and take them for a ride to give everyone a chance to get there. Papaw was telling us where to go riding around, near Leavenworth somewhere. But he got us lost and we didn't have any idea how to get back to Marengo. We finally came rolling in an hour or so late, and I can remember the family sitting up on the hill with worried looks on their faces. Uncle Paul was standing up there on crutches. I don't remember why, but I do remember Papaw saying, "Well, there's another man on crutches," because he had been telling us about Uncle Paul being on crutches. Charles Stroud wrote, When I was in high school, I was dating Linda. I lived in Marengo and she lived in Terre Haute. We rarely saw each other. I called her occasionally, but the cost was about $7 for 3 minutes, and I was making about 75 cents an hour. One Friday afternoon, I came home from school and told my mom I was going to go to Terre Haute. Dad was away in a revival. She tried to talk me out of it. Finally, she said that we would go over and talk to Papaw. She was hoping he would talk me out of it. She told Papaw, "Tell him he can't go to Terre Haute." Papaw said, "Charles, I don't think you should go. But if you are going, here's $20 you can take with you." I don't know if I ever paid him back. Finally, Mom said I could go if I took Dorothy with me. We went and had a really good time. Dorothy talked about it for years. Donald Moon wrote, Even though they had a garden near the house, Grandpa and Grandma also had one down by the barn. It was in walking distance, but still a far piece to carry produce by hand, so we would haul it by truck. That is why they called the garden the Truck Patch. I also remember a couple of places they lived in Marengo. When I was in the first grade, they lived near the schoolhouse. Esther and I would often go there for lunch and sometimes spend the night.
Dale Stroud wrote, This might have been the first summer after high school, but I was working for South Bend Appraisal Firm. I went from place to place there around Marengo, gathering information on real estate properties to determine how the properties should be taxed. I was paid so much per property, and Grandpa rode around with me, and we just had a good time that summer. He and I would go back to the house sometime during the day, and Grandma would fix us instant iced tea. I believe that was one of my favorite summers. Carol Ash wrote, Living next door for 18 years of my life, I have so many memories. There were very few days that I didn't spend time with Mama and Papa. Seeing a car turn into the lane and anticipating which cousins we get to play with today was always fun. Sitting on their front porch in the evening was a big daily event. Among my best memories were Sunday dinners with aunts, uncles, cousins, and Mama Stroud's fried chicken. She was the best cook. Mary Martin Patton wrote, One of my favorite memories was helping Mama can. She would say, Mary Ellen, can you come up the hill and wash jars for me? Your hands are so little and you can get them all the way in the jars. I spent lots of nights with them, and that path up the hill was used often. Roy Stroud wrote, I stayed with Papa and Grandma during my senior year when my folks moved to Bridgepoint, Illinois. We ate a lot of bologna as she wasn't able to cook too much then, but I was just fine with the bologna. When I was in high school, there were some ducks that landed on the pond. Papa had an old shotgun that had not been shot for years. I asked Papa if I could shoot the ducks. His response will not surprise most of you. He said, Well, I reckon you can. I asked Grandma if she would cook them. She said she would. I shot and hit them. She cooked the ducks, and they were so tough that the more you chewed, the bigger your bites became. Very little was eaten, and we had a good laugh that was repeated many times over the years.
Roger Moon wrote, if Margie were here, she likely would recall the many Sunday afternoons she spent with Grandpa and Aunt Dorothy after her move to Salem. On one particular afternoon, Uncle Clarence Spy tried to teach Margie's young daughter Kathy how to crawl. Charles Stroud wrote, I remember when I was about 14, I went with Bonnie's family to visit Chloe and Herbert. They were showing 8mm films. Mama and Papa were on the film. They went to the Marengo Pilgrim Holiness Church, and they were very strict and didn't believe in owning or watching television. I remember on the way home that Mama was fretting. She was very conscientious and was afraid that she had sinned by both being on the film and watching it. Papa said, Rosie, you ain't no movie star. Roger Moon wrote, if Esther were here, I suspect she would share this memory. Grandma Stroud was careful about her housekeeping, but when she would fall behind, she could be heard saying, I wish the white fairy would come and clean my house. One day, while she was away, Esther and Mom went and cleaned Grandma's house. They left a note that said, the white fairy finally came. Donald Moon wrote, when wild berries were plentiful, we would search the pastures for acres and picked berries by the gallons. Others back at the house would put them in water to rinse and inspect them. They would be canned and made into cobblers. Mary Bye wrote, when I was a kid, I had an autograph book and I had Mama and Papa sign it. They told me what to write and then they signed their names. I remember Mama didn't approve of what Papa wanted me to write, but I wrote it anyway because they were Papa's words. Roger Moon wrote, many of the grandchildren can attest to the reality that if you stopped at Grandpa's house and asked him to go somewhere with you, he was going to go. I made numerous trips with him, Aunt Dorothy, and my mother to court him for Kentucky Fried Chicken. A favorite memory is of the time I asked Grandpa to get in the car with me and show me the way to the much-talked-about shoe tree near Milltown. It's a memory I have treasured, and, because of that experience, when I became a grandpa, I later took my grandchildren, Daniel and Geneva, to see the shoe tree.
I am Shayna Carmichael, a great-granddaughter of Elvis and Rosie Stroud, granddaughter of Anna Mae Stroud Bye, and daughter of Wanda Bye Carmichael. I share with you a poem written by Elvis and Rosie's daughter, Mary Lou Colbert, sometime between 1984 and 1987, as a tribute to her father. It provides first-hand memories of a farming couple raising their children during the Great Depression. It speaks of Elvis and his summers at the plow to keep his family fed, and of his winters rising early to build a fire to keep his family warm. Our Father. Our father was a gracious man. He worked and labored with his hands. Hard times came along the way, but Jesus gave him strength each day. He worked so hard to raise a crop, it seemed sometimes he would drop. He'd work all day behind a plow. He always had the strength somehow. Our Father. With 7 little mouths to feed, there always seemed to be a need. Depression days, it wasn't funny. There was scarcely any money. But Mother helped our food to raise and always gave the Lord the praise. He would always meet the need. Our dad had 7 mouths to feed. Our Father. Those winter nights were so cold, he had no radio who told the weather for the days ahead. Let come what may, he'd jump in bed. He was the first to rise each day. He'd build a fire. You'd hear him say, "It's time to get up, the stove's red hot." We all got up, warm or not. Our Father. When Christmas time rolled around, we'd wish for snow to cover the ground. There were no blinking lights to see. Popcorn and bittersweet decked our tree. Toys, there were scarcely any, but love there was aplenty. In his heart we knew he grieved, but in our dad we all believed. Our Father. Time went by and he grew old. He always had a heart of gold. His grandkids loved him very much. He seemed to have that loving touch. In his eyes they all had wings. Not much wrong with anything. When they grew up and parents they became, grandparents we were. We felt the same. Our Father. The angels took him home one night to be where Jesus is the light. Our mother there he longed to meet. There she waited him to greet. We are gathering up there one by one, our brother and our sister gone. Oh, how we wept to say goodbye. Someday we'll meet them up on high.
I am Kim Stroud Deal, a great-granddaughter of Elvis and Rosie Stroud, granddaughter of Paul Stroud, and daughter of Roy Stroud. I share with you a poem written by Elvis and Rosie's daughter, Mary Lou Colber, sometime between 1973 and 1984, as a tribute to her mother. It provides first-hand memories of a young farming couple raising their children during the Great Depression. It speaks of a mother's undying devotions to her children and how she worked relentlessly to feed them and care for them. It also points to a mother's heartache when her children leave home, but of the love and pleasure with which she would welcome them back each time they came to see her. Our Mother. The thoughts we hold could fit no other. She was the first to hold us tight and care for us all through the night. She taught us children we should pray and thank the Lord for food each day. Her head bowed low, she breathed a prayer that God would keep us in his care. Our Mother. When springtime came, we'd see her go to the garden with her hoe. She worked and labored with her hands. The food she grew went in her cans. Wintertime was so much fun when all the evening chores were done. We'd gather around the fire so hot, beans and taters in the pot. Homemade biscuits she would make, in the oven they would bake. When the evening meal was done, she'd play with us. We'd all have fun, our mother. Those Sunday dinners she would fix, she cooked from scratch. She didn't have mix. A little of this and a little of that, eggs from the hen house and Dad's old hat. The rooster's eyes were open too, for in his heart I think he knew, if he was caught, off went his head, a flip and a flop, and he'd be dead. There in the kettle he would brew, homemade dumplings in there too. How she made those cakes and pies, she really cherished family ties, our mother. One by one we left the nest, we met someone we loved the best. To share our lives down through the years. Mother smiled through all her tears, no matter where we all would roam, she always welcomed us back home, our mother. God sent an angel down so bright and took our mother home one night. The angel took her while she slept. Our hearts were crushed, oh how we wept. Now she waits on heaven's shore. She's there to welcome us once more. We're gathering up there one by one, our sister and our brothers gone. I know our mother leaped with joy when she saw her girl and boy. The rest of us she waits to see. Unbroken may the circle be.
Bought a beautiful diamond ring, offered it to the sweetest thing I know, and she said she would take it. Started making some wedding plans. She looked at me and she took my hand and said, "Are you sure we can make it?" I said, "My granddad's still in love with my grandma." I said, "My dad still thinks my mom's the sweetest thing he ever saw." I come from a long line of love. When the times get hard, we don't give up. Forever's in my heart and in my blood. You see, I come from a long line of love. Years went by and we had a son. Now he thinks that he's found someone for him, and they're planning a wedding. He called me up on the phone today just to see what I had to say to him. Did I think he was ready? I said, "Oh, what his grandfather used
I am Paula Ash Frischknecht, a great-granddaughter of Elvis and Rosie Stroud, granddaughter of Bonnie Stroud Martin, and daughter of Carol Martin Ash. During a span between 1973 and 2017, the Strouds' grandchildren said goodbye to their grandparents, aunts, and uncles. Now, during this year, marking the 100th anniversary of Elvis and Rosie's marriage, we pause to remember them, their sons, daughters, sons-in-law, and daughters-in-law. We pay tribute to Rosa Pearl Bullington Stroud, January 29, 1900 to October 4, 1973. Cohen Elvis Stroud, June 9, 1897 to July 23, 1984. Geneva Stroud Moon, December 30, 1920 to December 7, 2000. John Moon, November 10, 1916 to January 16, 1999. Robert Paul Stroud, May 5, 1922 to April 28, 1987. Delcy Van Lanningham Stroud, December 8, 1921 to July 6, 2006. Nolan Delmont Stroud, November 2, 1923 to October 20, 1999. Anna Mae Ramsey Stroud, December 23, 1929 to November 2, 1999. Dorothy Pauline Stroud, November 13, 1925 to July 23, 2004. Mary Lou Stroud Colber, May 2, 1928 to November 26, 2013. Curtis Colber, March 1, 1924 to June 29, 2015. Bonnie Stroud Martin, July 8, 1930 to June 21, 2012. Maxie Martin, February 28, 1930 to May 3, 2005. Anna Mae Stroud By, October 21, 1933 to October 1, 1990. Clarence By, October 30, 1928 to January 9, 2017.
Mary Ann Bye's memory, as shared earlier, referenced the time she, as a young girl, asked Elvis and Rosie to sign her autograph book. They dictated words that Mary Ann then wrote, and they signed their names beneath them. Rosie wasn't happy with what Elvis wrote. His words, in true Elvis style, were, "Some people know a lot, some people know a little, and some people don't know nothing." Rosie's words, however, were reflective of the sentiments that carry through today. They were, "When you get old and ugly, and wrinkles in your face, remember the great times on the old home place."
So do your roaming in the springtime. You find your love in the summer sun. The frost will come and bring the harvest, and you can sleep when day is done. There is a time for us to wander, when time is young and so are we. The woods are greener over yonder. The path is new, the world is free. The path is new, the world is free.